Thank you very much for your kind words and greetings from Copenhagen. I arrived yesterday about midnight from our good Danish neighbors. Dear members of the ECR group, MEPs, officials, assistants, dear friends. It is so good to see you all. I have been the Finnish foreign minister for about 15 months, and I can assure you that the job is not easy. It is demanding, time-consuming, tough sometimes, but luckily, every once in a while, you get tasks like this, which you can really enjoy, being with friends. Earlier this year, on the 23rd of June, the British people were asked whether they want their country to remain in the European Union or leave it. It was a staggering day. And then came the next morning, when the results were ready. The majority of the public had voted for leave. I know I will never forget that morning. I had woken up early to see the outcome in my summer cottage, and then David Dimbleby announces those historic words. At 20 minutes to 5, we can now say that the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU. We are simply clear now that there is no way that Remain side can win. The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out. It was a historic moment, a seismic moment. Now, we may have different opinions about Brexit, but one thing is clear. For the ECR group, it is a big loss. We are going to lose our biggest delegation, our good friends, British Conservatives. However, our work must continue. I think European Conservatives and Reformists are needed now more than probably ever before. We are needed both in the negotiation process and after the UK's resignation is final. Britain will remain part of the European Union, maybe for 2 years, nobody knows exactly. The country has not triggered the Article 50 yet, and there is no hurry. The negotiation process will take a long time. And in that process, we all must work hard to reach an outcome which is good for both the European Union and Britain. Personally, I travelled to London about a week after the UK referendum. The main reason was to go and meet my Conservative friends and our allies, to talk with them and to learn more about the general mood in the country and inside the Tory party. But I also went there in order to voice assurance. After the Brexit voice, there were a lot of comments in the global media that excluded some revenge mentality. The idea was that the British have made a wrong decision and now they must be punished. I went to London with a simple message. There is no room for revenge, grudge, or ill will. The British people have had their say, and we must all respect the result. And, like Angela Merkel, I also think there is no hurry in this process. Keep calm and carry on. Let's have a good results together. That is the attitude we need now. It is up to the British government to decide when to trigger Article 50 and start the formal and legal process of leaving the European Union. We don't decide whether the UK is a member of the European Union or not. It is up to British people to decide. We want to cooperate with the UK. We want to be their friends, no matter what organisation they belong or don't belong. From the Finnish point of view, it is of utmost importance that we reach a good and fruitful deal about the new relationship between EU and UK. Britain is one of our biggest trading partners. We want to keep Britain in the single market. There are a lot of direct links between Finland and UK. We cherish our excellent relationship today as well as in the future. I believe that the ECR Group can play an essential role in this process. This group, all of us, represents common sense. Amongst us, there is understanding for both sides. We acknowledge the fact that neither side wants an impoverished neighbour. My dear friends, one day, in the foreseeable future, Britain will not longer be a member of the European Union. And what kind of union do we have after that? Snow White with 26 dwarfs. We are in the middle of the crucial times. We are on the verge of some change, because the status quo is not an option anymore. It is a decent rock and roll band, but it is an option for anything else. There are a lot of speculations. Some say that the Brexit will trigger a domino effect and there will be referendums in other EU countries as well. European nations will lose a common agenda and end up in turmoil intensified by internal tiffs. Some say Brussels will now learn a lesson and change the course. Time for ever closer union has come to an end. However, many analysts also argue that once the British have abandoned the boat, the biggest obstacle on the way towards federal Europe has been removed. Now the road is open and the EU will speedily proceed towards a strong Centerland federalist supranational state. I really hope that wouldn't be the case. In this respect, the role of the ECR Group is vital and fundamental. We must make sure that even without the British delegation, this group is dynamic and capable of working hard for the best sovereign, independent European nations. We must make sure that our message is heard. We all want to reform the EU, and so did the British government, led by David Cameron. Before the last British general election, he talked about the importance of renegotiating the British membership and then organise in-or-out referendum about it. David Cameron's ultimate problem was that the British people did not, and most probably still don't, believe in the EU's capability of reforming itself. When David Cameron first mentioned the in-or-out referendum, it should have been the biggest wake-up call ever in Brussels. It should have been. One of the biggest members is considering whether to leave the Union. Shouldn't we react somehow and do everything we can to keep Britain in? They want reform, and so do many of others, us. Okay, let's do it. Let's reform the EU to serve its citizens better. Did something like this happen? No. And there we are. The majority of the British people think that their country is better off outside the European Union. For the rest of us, it is vital that we continue to work hard in order to renew the European Union. We have a good agenda in this group and a clear vision. Our delegations have been doing very well in the recent national general elections. Many of our parties are in the government and we have grown in numbers. This is a very, very big group, actually, in the European Parliament. And it has grown a lot since it was founded. And you have worked very hard to make that happen, and I respect it. Having been in the Parliament for 2 years, it was a time of my life in one sense, to get good new friends, which has been rents from that moment onwards. And we are a channel to those who believe that the EU can work and do better as long as it is reformed. Let me next draw a bit wider picture. It is, of course, not only Brexit that challenges the European Union at the moment. Europe is faced with the multiple crises today. The euro crisis is not over, and it will be with us as long as we don't act accordingly to change the course of the bailout policy. The refugee crisis is enormous. The security of Europe hangs in the balance. This overall situation calls for wise European politicians. We need politicians who understand how to best solve both internal and external problems. At the moment, wherever you look, you see failing aspirations, new problems, and inadequate solutions. Time will not take care of our problem. The root causes of the crisis are in many ways different than those of the previous crises. So policy based entirely on reactive measures or just trying to manage the effects of the crisis can prove disastrous for the European Union. In fact, of all the major international actors, it is EU that is suffering most in the era of power policies, since the EU lacks the proper instruments and political willingness to engage in this field. The EU's power is based on its soft power instruments, on its economic and diplomatic means, and of its own example of peaceful resolution of conflicts. And these fronts we have not much to show at the moment. The aggravation of the European security situation implies, therefore, a big risk for the European Union in many ways, and not least by making it look ineffective in the eyes of its own citizens, which diminishes its acceptability. We see this in many EU countries in domestic policies, elections, and internal developments. People are confused about the EU's role and the situation in Europe. In their eyes, EU has lost its ability to carry out its main task, to consolidate peace and stability in Europe, promote prosperity, create and enable jobs creation, and safeguard its own principles and values for the people. How then the EU could win the trust of its citizens and play a role in ensuring prosperity and security in Europe? A starting point for the European Union is to take a hard look at the mirror. There is a problem and there is an answer in the same mirror. The EU needs to listen carefully what the people are saying in individual home countries of ours. It needs to walk the talk and implement reforms that have been demanded for a long time. As to tackling the main crises that are challenging the security and well-being in the European citizens, a better understanding of their root causes as well of their mutual linkage is needed. The more EU's foreign and security policy core principles and goals are contested, the more the EU should steer its policies towards strengthening them, not without the NATO, but with the NATO and inside the NATO. Because terrorism is a big problem in Finland, in European Union, and each member states as well, and it needs wide cooperation between all the member states. And we must have effective efforts in conflict prevention in Africa and the Middle East. The fact that the international community has not been able to stop the war in Syria doesn't mean that the Union's efforts to try to prevent conflicts elsewhere would go in vain. And there is one comparison in that. Russia went to Syria, and they were able to do it. But European Union countries are unable to tackle this problem, which is now humanitarian catastrophe and also the breeding base of terrorism and violence. The current situation is not helped by repeating such slogans as "we need more integration." We need more integration. I have heard that 1,000 times, too many times. No, the first step forward is actually to realize and accept that the citizens of the European sovereign countries do not support the idea of an ever closer supranational union. They don't want to see the power flowing to Brussels to the hands of the technocrats and unelected commissioners. Understanding this and the reform of the European Union would increase its acceptability and thus make it a more plausible player on the global arena. European nations, sovereign, independent, working together, side by side, that is the vision shared by the ECR group. And now, in the middle of multiple crises and on the verge of change, we need to act and speak up. From this basis, European nations can start to see the real value of working together with our partners near and far. Thank you very much.